Hello, welcome back to my channel. Oshale here, and you're watching Oshi Reads. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about some of the books that I am very, very excited to read in 2024. And this is just going to be part one because since I'm doing a low buy, low spend year, I will not be spending money on books necessarily this year. At least my budget for books is not really going to be as big as it may be if I wasn't going to be doing a low buy, low spend, and I will be utilizing the library a lot. Also, I am a huge proponent of rereading. I'm a huge rereader. I love rereading books, especially books that I love. There are certain books that I've reread countless times over the years that I go back to again and again and again. And I will be rereading a lot of books in 2024 like I always do. So this stack is going to contain some rereads and also some books that I have never read because I was shopping my shelves or picking my TBR from my extensive collection here. And I have quite a large TBR to be read stack just completely dispersed within my collection. This is not even everything. You guys aren't really seeing all my shelves. So this first stack is going to contain rereads and then the books that I shopped from my shelves for my TBR. And part two will contain my highly anticipated reads, like new releases that will be coming out that I'll be getting from the library, and also ebooks, books that I'll be reading via Kindle. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So this is going to be in no particular order. I'm just going to be grabbing them and showing you. The very first book I have is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Now, this is a very nostalgic edition for me. This is the edition I had when I was a kid that I bought at Barnes & Noble's with my dad when I was first introduced to this book at, I think I was 11 at the time. I was in 5th grade. And I have fond memories of reading this for the very first time. This was my first Jane Austen read. I actually read this before I even read Pride and Prejudice. And I remember reading this with a dictionary next to me. I was highlighting all the words in the book that I couldn't understand, and then I was looking them up in the dictionary. But that is my fondest memory of reading this book, was my very first read. And I have come back to this book again and again and again over the years. This is one of my favorite books of all time. And I haven't read it in a while. So this is only one of the editions I have. If you look behind me, here's another edition right here. And I think I have 2 other editions somewhere, but this is the edition that I love reading the most just because of the memories attached to it. So yes, I will be rereading Sense and Sensibility again, revisiting the Dashwood girls, my favorite sisters outside of the sisters in Little Women. We will be seeing what Eleanor is up to. We'll be seeing what Margaret is up to with her little mischievous self. We'll be seeing what Marianne is up to, poor thing. The dashing Mr. F and the dastardly Willoughby. Don't even get me started on Willoughby. Ooh, but yes, I'm excited. And then what I usually do is I'll reread the book and then I'll watch the movie. And my favorite version of the movie is with Emma. Oh my goodness, I'm completely blanking on her name, but it starts with, her first name is Emma. I can't think of her last name right now. And it also has Hugh. I'm just blanking on everyone's names. And that's not like me. Y'all, this is so embarrassing. As I'm editing this, I have no idea what was going on with my brain, but I was desperately trying to remember Emma Thompson and Hugh Grant's names. Emma Thompson and Hugh Grant, girl, what is going on? Alan Rickman, I can always remember his name. May he rest in peace. My brain isn't on, but that is my favorite version. Next up in the stack is Years by Laverell Spencer. Now, Laverell Spencer was the OG slow burn romance writer. Now we have so many romance writers who are excellent at the slow burn romance, but for me, Laverell Spencer was the OG. She did it first, at least to me, outside of the classics. Now, this is great if you are a romance reader that doesn't like a lot of explicit stuff in your books. You don't like a lot of smut. You just want the love story. You want a meaty background, you want to see the love grow between the characters over time, over circumstances, then you would you would love Laverne Spencer. So this is basically about a young woman named Linnea Brandenburg, and she's very, very eager to begin her very first teaching position. This takes place back in the early 1900s, like 1917. And so she is 18 years old. She goes to this town in the middle of nowhere, Alamo, North Dakota. And this is her very first grown-up big girl job, teacher. And she is not really used to living in such a small town. It's a farming town with a lot of farmers. And the Westergaards are this family that kind of take her in, because back in the day, young women couldn't live alone. It was considered scandalous, especially if you were unmarried. Well, definitely if you were unmarried. So a lot of the school teachers back then that would travel out west or all over the country to teach in different positions, if they were unmarried, they would live with the family in town that would take them in. So the Westergaards took her in, and they are farmers, and they live a very just sparse, harsh life. They're also very different than what she's used to. They're very quiet. They're very stoic. There's not a lot of laughter in the home. There's not a lot of talking in the home. They work very hard from like sun up to sundown. And she's very spirited and outspoken. She just comes from a different environment. And so it's kind of interesting to see how she meshes with this family, the conflicts that arise just based off of their different upbringings and backgrounds. And of course, she starts to slowly fall in love with one of the characters. He's the farmer. He's like the head of the household. And World War I is looming. And she's maturing. She's only 18 years old. And Teddy Westergaard is the gentleman, the farmer that she slowly begins to form a bond with. And he has a tragic backstory, and that has made him very cold and hard. And it's just a beautiful story, y'all. And it takes place over time. And I haven't read this since I read it for the first time years ago. It must have been back in like 15, 16, I don't know, 14. It was a long time ago, and I have never reread it since. So it's been on my mind, it's been in my thoughts, so I'll be revisiting. Next up, I have I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, and this one is by Erica L. Sanchez. This was sent to me by the publishers. It's a New York Times bestseller. I have not read this yet, but I've heard great things. It was a National Book Award finalist, so always good. The back blurb seems like it's going to be very poignant, very coming of age, great writing about finding yourself, you know, the hero's journey. So perfect Mexican daughters do not go away to college. They do not move out of their parents' house after high school graduation. Perfect Mexican daughters never abandon their family. But Julia is not your perfect Mexican daughter. That was her sister Olga's role. Then a tragic accident leaves Olga dead and Julia reassembling the shattered pieces of her family. And no one seems to acknowledge that Julia is broken too. Instead, her mother channels her grief into pointing out every possible way Julia has failed. But it's not long before Julia suspects that Olga might not have been as perfect as everyone thought. With the help of her best friend, Lorena, and her first love, first everything, Connor, Julia is determined to uncover the truth. Was Olga really what she seemed? And how can Julia even attempt to live up to a seemingly impossible ideal? This is right up my alley. I love books like this, family dramas, coming of age, you know, a little bit of a mystery thrown in there, first love. Like, this is everything I love in a book. I've heard great things. If you have read this one, let me know in the comments how you liked it. No spoilers. Next up is one of my favorite books of all time. I reread it periodically. I haven't read it in a while, and in a while I mean several years now. And this is Joy in the Morning by Betty Smith. She famously wrote A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. That is the book she's really known for. This is a little known book by her that I love. And this tells the story of Carl and Annie, a young married couple in the early 1900s, I think 1920s, 1919, around that time. And Annie is from Brooklyn, the wrong side of the tracks, from a lower class family. Carl comes from the upper middle class family, very upward mobility. You know, he's going to be the first in his family to go to college, that kind of stuff. And he's his parents' pride and joy. They've put all their hopes and dreams into him. So him meeting Annie, who, you know, dropped out of school, didn't complete schooling, and is just a voracious reader and so curious and just loves to learn, but doesn't have the formal education, and also comes from the wrong side of the tracks, for lack of better words. Him meeting Annie and falling in love was not his parents' plan for him. And Carl goes away to school. He in the East. I can't remember what city right now. I want to say Boston or New York, one of those, can't remember. Could be completely wrong. And he enrolls in law school, and his parents, again, have put everything into him. All their hopes and dreams, are so proud of him. He's the apple of their eye. They're obsessed with him. And so him all of a sudden marrying Annie without their permission, without their blessing, which they are completely against, completely excommunicates him from his family in a way, and they disown him, kind of. And by that I mean they're no longer going to be financially supporting him once they find the news. And so you have Carl and Annie starting their lives together. He brings Annie with him to the small college town where he's going to school, where he's studying to be a lawyer. And it's just beautiful. It's the story of their first year of marriage, Carl in school, Annie coming into her own, being a wife. She's young. She's trying to figure out her bearings. She's in a small town. She doesn't know anyone. She's lived in Brooklyn all her life. She also has a bit of trauma in her past, and I'm not going to spoil that. But it's just a beautiful story. I read it for the first time when I was really young. I feel like I read a lot of really life-changing books, and a lot of my favorite books when I was in elementary school. But I read this for the first time in 5th grade, and I just remember it really moved me, and I have come back to it again and again. There's actually a movie that I've never watched, and I've been trying to watch it, but I can't find it anywhere. It drives me insane. I literally cannot find this movie anywhere. But yes, Joy in the Morning, I'll be rereading. I'm so excited to revisit that story. The next book is a book I have not read yet by one of my absolute favorite authors. She's an auto-buy author for me. This is Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. Freaking love her. I have read everything she's ever put out and loved them all to varying degrees. And the last book I read by her was Clap When You Land, which I absolutely adored. My favorite book by her is probably With the Fire on High, tied with The Poet X. I also really loved Clap When You Land. Oh, it's so hard to choose. And normally I read her books via audiobook because she narrates them herself, and it's just chef's kiss. But I decided to buy this one. I also buy the books too, but I don't have the audiobook of this. I am deciding to actually read this. And I don't know what this is about, and I just kind of bought it. I didn't care what it was about. But essentially it is like a family saga, and it's a story of one Dominican American family told through the voices of its women as they await a gathering that will forever change their lives. So that is really cool. It says Flora has a gift. She can predict to the day when someone will die. So when she decides she wants a living wake, a party to bring her family and community together to celebrate the long life she's led, her sisters are surprised. Has Flora foreseen her own death or someone else's? Does she have other motives? She refuses to tell her sisters, Matilde, Pastora, and Camila. But Flora isn't the... Sorry if you hear noise, this is the dogs, as always. But Flora isn't the only person with secrets. Her sisters are hiding things too. And the next generation cousins, Ona and Yadi, face tumult of their own. Spanning the 3 days prior to the wake, Family Lore traces the lives of each of the Marte women, weaving together past and present, Santo Domingo and New York City. Told with Elizabeth Acevedo's imitable voice, this is an indelible portrait of sisters and cousins, aunts and nieces, one family's journey through their history, helping them better navigate all that is to come. That was my first time reading that on camera with you all, and it just made me even more excited to read this, finally. Next up is, I'm not even looking, Claiming the Courtesan by Anna Campbell. And again, this is another book that I read a really long time ago. I think I was in college when I read this, back in the 2010s, or it might have been like, no, it was before then. I was in college, yes, but I'm getting the years wrong. I think I read this for the first time in 2007, 2008, around that time frame. And I remember this was well before you know, the dark romances of today that have completely taken over the contemporary romance market with just sociopaths and psychopaths and villains as heroes, basically, and just crazy stuff going down in books. This was before that. So when this book came out, it was very groundbreaking and very new for its time because it was so dark. But this is like a captive, I can't think words today, but this is a captive love story. What is that thing where you fall in love with your captive slowly? I can't think of words, but it's that. And yes, it was very scandalous for its time, but I haven't reread it in years. Like literally, I can't remember the last time I read this book. It must have been over 10 years ago at this point. But the Duke of Calmore knows her as Soraya, London's most celebrated courtesan. Men fight duels to spend an hour in her company, and only he comes close to taming her. Flying in the face of society, he decides to make her his bride. Then she vanishes seemingly into thin air. Dire circumstances have forced Verity Ashton to barter her innocence and change her name for the sake of her family. But Calmore destroys her plans for a respectable life when he discovers her safe haven. He kidnaps her, sweeping her away to his hunting lodge in Scotland, where he vows to bend her to his will. Syndrome. What am I thinking of? Syndrome. It's gonna drive me crazy until I can remember it. There, he seduces her anew. Verity spends night after night with him in his bed, and all... I can't talk in this video! Stockholm Syndrome! This video is so all over the place. There, he seduces her anew. Verity spends night after night with him in his bed, and though she still dreams of escape and independence, she knows she can never flee the unexpected, unwelcomed love for the proud, powerful lover who claims her, both body and soul. I think I hauled this like a year ago in my problematic romance haul, I think maybe, or another haul that I did. But yes, I haven't read this in years. So excited. It's going to be a good time. And I don't know why I can't think in this video, but next up is Purity by Jackson Pierce. This is a book I bought a long time ago via Book Outlet before I stopped purchasing from Book Outlet. There's a video talking about that. Anyways, so yes, Purity. This is like a young adult novel, and it's basically a novel about love, loss, and sex, but not necessarily in that order. Before her mother died, Shelby promised 3 things: to listen to her father, to love as much as possible, and to live without restraint. Those promises become harder to keep when Shelby's father joins the planning committee for the Princess Ball, an annual dance that ends with the ceremonial vow to live pure lives. In other words, no bad behavior, no breaking the rules, and definitely no sex. Torn between promises 1 and 3, Shelby makes a decision to exploit a loophole and lose her virginity before taking the vow. But somewhere between failed hookup attempts, and helping her dad plan the ball, Shelby starts to understand what her mother really meant with her father, what her father really needs, and who really has the right to her purity. And this book just called to me because I grew up in the thick of purity culture. I grew up in a church. It was a non-denominational Pentecostal type of situation, and I actually wore a purity ring for many years while I was growing up into my 20s. And I indeed did make that vow to my parents to stay pure. And it was this whole cultural phenomenon that happened in the 90s and early 2000s. And it was very damaging. And so I had to unlearn a lot of stuff. And I will make a video about that one day, maybe. And so this book really called to me because I really could identify with the situation. And I've never read it. And it's been sitting on my shelf for years, and it's time. Next up is a reread, and this is a series that I reread so many times, like at least every other year I reread this series, and it's one of my favorite series, so it's no surprise that I'm revisiting it again in 2024. This is the Wrinkle and Time trilogy by Madeleine L'Engle. It is the 50th anniversary edition, if you've never seen this edition. This is not the edition I grew up with, but I like it because it has all 3 books in one place. It has A Wrinkle in Time, it has A Wind in the Door, and A Swiftly Tilting Planet. If you have never read these books, you are missing out. These were the books that introduced me to science fiction. I was a huge Madeleine L'Engle stan as a kid. I think I've read majority of her backlog. And I'm just obsessed with this series. If you've seen the movie, it really doesn't give the books justice at all. At all. But yes, this introduced me to science fiction. I just remember loving Meg. I think Meg was one of the first protagonists that I just connected to so deeply because I could see so much of myself in her. And her story was just so important to me and meant so much to me when I was little. Her relationship with her little brother just felt so real to me because I was really, really close with my baby brother when I was a teen, and I had a large role in his upbringing. So just how she was with Charles Wallace, I really, really identified with that, and I just freaking love this series so much. So I'll be revisiting this in 2024. Next up is another Madeleine L'Engle book. It is called Camila. I have not read Camila since I first read it as a kid. I bought it some years ago because I just wanted to own it, because I remember the reading experience being so magical, but I couldn't remember anything else about the book. So I bought it and I want to revisit it because I just freaking love Madeleine L'Engle, her writing, everything. And I just remember reading this when I was young and just falling in love with the story. And the fact that I can't remember anything makes me excited, and I want to know if as I'm reading, if things will come back to me and I'll start to remember. But there is a blurb from Oprah magazine, for what that's worth, that says one of 25 books you can't put down. And basically it is a coming of age story about 15-year-old Camila Dickinson. She's led a very sheltered life with her architect father and her stunningly beautiful mother. I do remember that. Her mother was very beautiful. But suddenly, just like this safe home that she's always known and loved starts to break down because her parents' marriage starts to break down. And she's caught in the middle. Now, she meets Frank, her best friend's brother, and he's someone she can really talk to about her life. She can really open up to him, talk to him about death, God, everything that's going on in her home life, her dream of becoming an astronomer. Just amazing that a 15-year-old wants to be an astronomer. An astronomer. Wants to become an astronomer. That is very admirable. But as Camila and Frank roam the streets of New York City together, lost in conversation, and he introduces her to people who are so different from anyone she's ever known in her little bubble, he opens her eyes to worlds that she's just never experienced before, almost as if he were a telescope, helping her to see the stars. I love that. But will Camila's first love be all she hopes, or will Frank just add more heartbreak to her life? I don't know why, but I feel like this book is gonna break me. I'm ready. Next up, I have another reread. This is 15 by Beverly Cleary. There we go. She wrote the Ramona Quimby series, I believe, if I'm not completely spacing. I think so. Didn't she write the Ramona Quimby series? Or did she write a different series? Yes, she did. She wrote the Ramona Quimby series, if you remember that from growing up at a specific time period, because I don't think those books are very popular anymore with kids, like Beezus and Ramona. She also wrote Henry and Rigsby. Yep. And I read this book again in elementary school in either fourth grade or fifth grade. And it was this exact edition. I searched high and low to find this exact edition, and I finally found it on Etsy. And it's in impeccable condition, because the one that I had that I stole from my fourth grade teacher, I'm so sorry, borrowed and never returned, because she had a library in her classroom and I would take books out, and there were 2 or 3 books that just never made it back to her shelves. Oh my God. But this was one of them, and the copy she had in her classroom was literally falling apart. This dust jacket was like in tatters, like the book itself was in tatters. So I searched high and low for this exact edition. It's very hard to find. Bought it immediately once I found it. I didn't even care how much it was. And this is a library copy, which is so cool. The Morrow Eagle Library edition. And I think it even came with like a little library card thing that I took out. But anyways, this book is about Jane. She's 15 years old. She's never been on a date. She's never had a boy like her, nothing. And she is a sophomore in high school, and she's really close with her parents, and she's just this sweet little thing. She's just, cute. Nothing's really ever happened to her before. She meets Stan. Okay, how 1950s that name, Stan. And he's tall, he's good looking, he's older, he's 16, he can drive, okay? He can drive. And she's babysitting when she meets him, I think. And he thinks she's older at the time. But this is basically just about Jane and Stan and first love and her first date and just the growing pains of coming into your own at this age and meeting a boy you really like and wanting him to like you back and wanting to impress him and wanting to act older, but you're still just 15 and you're still just a baby. And I remember when I read this, because I read this when I was literally like 10, I just thought she was just so mature for her age. I thought 15 was just so old. Also, just the time period this was written in, the outfits, the illustrations in this book are also another thing that I really love. Also, Jane's cat is hilarious and plays quite a large role in a silly way. Look at the illustrations. So cool. Let me see if I can find. But yeah, I reread this book from time to time. Haven't reread it in a while. I'm just trying to find. Stan comes to pick up Jane from her date, meets her dad. Vibes. And her mom. Forgot her mom was there. Her mom just looks so elegant. See her mom? I'm trying to see what other pictures I can find. First date vibes. I could literally spend this whole video just showing all the illustrations, but we gotta move on. Rereading. All right, and last but certainly not least, for this particular video, I will be starting the Percy Jackson series. Now, I think that they're doing like either a movie or a TV show or something, and people are very excited. And I missed the Percy Jackson train. I was a Harry Potter girl. That was the time period that I grew up in, so I missed the whole Percy Jackson train, okay? But it's never too late. It's never too late to get on the train. And I am boarding the train in 2024. I have the first 2 books. I didn't want to buy all of them. I think I will start with these 2. And if I fall in love with the series, like everyone who loves the series is telling me that I will, then I will probably get the rest of the books from the library. And then if I'm obsessed, I will go ahead and buy the rest of them. But I have Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief, book 1. And I have Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters, book 2. So I'm getting on the Percy Jackson train just in time for the movie or show, whatever it is that comes out in, I think it comes out next year. And that is it for this video. Here are all the books that I will be reading and rereading. Stay tuned for part 2, which will be featuring highly anticipated new releases that I will be getting from the library, as well as Kindle books, ebooks that I will be reading in 2024. But here's my stack, and I highly encourage you to shop your shelves, you know, dwindle down that TBR. We're so obsessed with buying new books, and you know, book consumerism is through the roof. The hauls that I see on TikTok alone are actually insane. So I have to wonder, it's almost becoming like fast fashion, but for books. Like the publishing industry is, you know, sending all these books to all these influencers and like readers and reviewers, and it's like, are they reading them? What's going on? I hope they're donating them if they're not reading them. That's a video for another day, but thank you so much for watching. I will catch y'all in my next video. Let me know what books that you'll be reading in 2024. Will you be buying books? Will you be utilizing your library? Are you an e-reader type of person? Will you be reading books via Kindle or Nook or iPad? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you give this video a like. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know it was lengthy. And if you've made it to the end of the video, definitely make sure you subscribe if you like what you saw today, and hit the notifications bell, and I will catch you in the next one. Stay tuned for part 2. Bye, everyone.